Should you buy a used Renault Zoe in July 2023? It's time for another used market review. The last one was on the Hyundai Ioniq, and if you haven't seen that yet, there's a link in the description. Go and watch it after this. The EV used market is extremely attractive to buyers at the moment. Prices are at an all-time low, and unless you're a car dealer who is a little bit upset that they can't make as much money on them as they used to, it represents a really good time to buy a second-hand electric vehicle. There's a strong rhetoric around EV depreciation being a terrible thing at the moment, and oh, don't buy an EV, they lose so much money. But those same people used to tell us EVs are far too expensive, nobody can afford to buy them. Well, what we're now seeing is that they're becoming very affordable indeed. And in this video, we're going to look at examples of the Renault Zoe on the used market. The Renault Zoe came to market in 2013 after the production-ready version of it was unveiled at the 2012 Geneva Motor Show. You can still buy one brand new today if you want to, although the model has changed a little bit over the years. It's got fairly inoffensive styling. I've never really understood why they didn't just make an electrified Clio and play to the brand strength of the Renault Clio, why the Zoe had to stand on its own 2 feet, but it has nevertheless been quite the success for Renault. It's a 5-door Super Mini in a very similar form factor to the Clio, bearing in mind that a current model Clio is significantly bigger than the original one was. I think the Zoe is actually a bigger car than a lot of people give it credit for. It's not this tiny little useless city car, it's actually got a reasonably useful amount of space. There are 3 different battery sizes that you can find in a Zoe, and like other models we've covered in this series of videos, that's linked to age, where newer ones get bigger batteries. There is a 22 kilowatt hour, a 40 kilowatt hour and a 50 kilowatt hour, although the usable capacities for each are actually very slightly more than those figures, but we talk about a Zoe 22, 40 and 50. And you're looking at 80, 140, 180 mile range in summer maybe. I might be a little bit optimistic, especially for the older cars. Some of the 22s, you'd maybe struggle a little bit to see quite 80 miles out of them. But I think those are the ballparks. I think that's quite similar. That's maybe slightly below the WLTP for each model. And I think probably representative of a real world range. As always, if you've got a Zoe, get yourself in the comments and tell me what the real range actually looks like for you. Tell me what year it is, what model it is, and what kind of summer and winter range you see from it, because that information is really useful for would-be Zoe buyers to make their own mind up based on the experience of actual owners. It's all well and good watching reviews and reading, all those kind of experiences like that from journalists, but there's nothing better than real world ownership experiences from people that have actually owned and driven one for a decent length of time. Type 2 AC charging is standard on all models at 22 kilowatts. You'll find some with 43 kilowatt fast AC charging, and that is why you'll see AC charging at 43 kilowatts on some rapid chargers. But it was an optional extra, and it's widely regarded as not actually being particularly worth it. It seems it only charges at 43 kilowatts for quite a short part of the charging cycle, and then quickly normalizes back towards the 22, meaning that it probably wasn't worth the extra when they were new, but now, if you can find it on a used car, it might well be worth considering. It doesn't seem to attract too much of a price premium on the used market, so keep an eye out for it, but I wouldn't set your hopes on it being, a dead essential optional extra for you. The newest ZE50 model saw DC CCS charging become available, but only as an optional extra on some of the earlier ones. It wasn't available on all of them. I think today, if you buy a new Zoe, that it's standard. I'm not 100% sure on that because the models have changed so much. There's been even of the ZE50, there's been a few iterations, but just keep an eye out for DC charging on the ZE50. If it's something you consider essential, you need to double check that it's definitely there. Okay then, let's talk about Euro NCAP, because I know that is going to be a contentious issue with the Zoe. When it was originally tested in 2013, the Renault Zoe was awarded a 5-star Euro NCAP rating. It scored very highly in all the categories and therefore made it one of the safest cars on the road. You wouldn't expect anything less really from Renault, would you? They were the first manufacturer to bring us a 5-star Euro NCAP car in the shape of the Laguna 2 back in 2002. But all hell broke loose in 2021 when the updated Zoe was awarded 0 stars. Given it was largely the same car, with not that much had changed over the years, This seems really quite odd, doesn't it? Yes, the drivetrain has evolved, but the basic car itself is pretty similar over the generations. Well, Euro NCAP has changed quite a lot between 2013 and 2021, and it puts an awful lot of weight on electronic safety systems, things like lane keep assist and emergency braking and all that other guff that, let's be honest, everybody hates. But the goalposts move a lot as this type of tech becomes a required part of the test, and obviously Zoe does have some of these systems, but it doesn't have all of them. But arguably more importantly, there was also a change to an airbag, which reduced the performance in the test. Renault changed the side airbags on the Zoe, and it reduced the performance of them. That's arguably much more serious, but I'm led to believe that this, now correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I'm sure you will put me right, but I'm led to believe that the base model of the Zoe is the one that had this modified side airbag, whereas the higher spec models still have the same one that the older models had. Now, I might be wrong on that, but that was my understanding. And I'm sure you will correct me if I'm wrong. But that was what led to some of the massive reduction in the crash test scoring, was that this side airbag that they had changed wasn't as effective. And that's really bad. I mean, Renault come out saying, well, you know, it still performs to all safety legislations and it's legal to be on the road and all that stuff. But this will have hit Zoe sales quite hard, I would have thought. Now, overall, would I worry about safety when I say don't buy a Renault Zoe? No, not a chance. I mean, at the end of the day, in 2013, it was a 5-star car. Yes, things have moved on a little bit, but am I that concerned? No. I think that Euro NCAP constantly moving the goalposts is the real problem here, and I'm not sure I put too much weight on it. But don't take my word for it. I mean, I drive a Citroen Ami, which would have a negative NCAP rating if it could, so maybe my attitude towards crash safety and stuff is different to yours. At the end of the day, if the Euro NCAP performance puts you off, fair enough, but I'm just saying it wouldn't put me off. And the next elephant in the room we need to talk about is the battery lease, because that'll always come up in conversation when you talk about a Renault Zoe. The 22 and the 40 were sold with leased batteries. This kept pricing low. The list price of these cars was much, much lower than the ZE50. And it helped allay fears about battery longevity. Back then, especially 2013, people were really, really worried about being stuck with an aging battery. Well, what happens when the battery gives up and all that? Well, this meant that you had a perpetual battery warranty because the battery wasn't yours, it was leased, and Renault or Renault Finance would step in and sort it out if it fell below a certain state of health. Well, in reality, the battery longevity was much better than anybody expected, and therefore the requirement for it to be leased wasn't actually all that. There was also, if you look back to the days like the Renault Fluence, one of the models that was preceding the Zoe, there was this desire to do battery swapping, a little bit like the Chinese manufacturer NIO. They're obsessed with battery swaps. Renault were trying to get in on that action, but then they quickly decided that wasn't worth the hassle and so didn't bother. You've been able to buy out the battery lease for quite some time now, so if you want to give Renault Finance a load of money, they'll let you have full ownership of your battery. They're actually actively dumping some of the really early leases. My 2013 Kangoo ZE, they've actually offered me the battery for £1.20. Because they're not interested in keeping it on a lease. So if I want it, I can stop paying the lease payment, I can give them £1.20 and I can take full ownership of the battery. I don't think they've quite got there for that with Zoe. I think it would still be a decent chunk of change if you wanted to buy out the battery, but it's much more of an option than it ever used to be. Only you can decide if the lease works for you, if you want to own your battery. That decision will be 100% personal, and only you can weigh up the pros and cons. The lease gives you a warranty, and it gives you breakdown cover, but it is an ongoing cost you'll need to find. I think the cheapest lease on the Zoe starts at about £60 a month, depending on your annual mileage, so it is not a particularly cheap endeavour. And it can be a bit of a pain when you come to sell the car, because it is up to you to transfer it to the next owner. You will continue to be liable for the battery lease unless you arrange to transfer it to the next owner. I've never really understood how Renault Finance got away with this. It seems really onerous, and it almost seems like unfair contract terms type stuff where they don't seem to take responsibility for transferring the lease. That seems to sit with you. I don't like that at all. And even some dealerships, especially smaller dealerships, don't like taking them in part exchange because they end up then having to deal with the lease. And you know, you're really small, like porter cabin on some waste ground type dealerships don't want to be doing that. Renault main dealers, as far as I know, are absolutely fine with it, but smaller dealerships, not so much. But all in all, you need to make your mind up, and you should go in with your eyes open. Decide whether the lease battery is right for you, and pick your search on that basis. Anyway, on to the classifieds and the bottom of the market bingo time. I like this bit. So, £4,150 was the cheapest Zoe I could find on AutoTrader at the time of filming. I was a bit disappointed yet again because I was hoping for something cheaper with a load more miles on. Maybe I need to start looking on like Facebook Marketplace and other dodgier marketplaces rather than just AutoTrader for this cheap end of the market. But what we have is a ZE22 with a battery lease, 77,000 miles on the clock, and it seems this one actually does have the rare 43 kilowatt AC charging, so that's nice. But if we have a closer look at it, it has a fair few battle scars. It does mention that in the adverts. Look, it's a bit scruffy, but I think I'd give this one a miss. If you actually have a look at how rough this one is, yeah, it's had a hard life, and for once, I actually think it's overpriced. I think £41.50 for it in this state, it's not for me. Add just £290 to your budget, and you would get this 16 reg battery leased ZE22 with 41,000 miles on the clock, and it looks in far better condition, much cleaner inside than out. And actually, I think this is where the smart money would go. It seems that is about the sweet spot for them, sort of £4,500 to £5,000. This one at £48.50 with an owned battery might even be the best of the lot. It's not that much more than the battery leased ones. You get the owned battery, and again, it looks tidy, it's low mileage, and I think compared with the one that's right at the bottom of the market, that is exactly where I'd want to be. If you want one in an actual colour, if you can call silver an actual colour, this one is £1,000 more. It's also battery owned, but it's silver. It's got the 43 kilowatt AC charging. I mean, I think this one's maybe actually slightly overpriced. I think I'd want to be somewhere in between that sort of £4,800 and this £5,900. I think that there's a sweet spot in the middle there where you'd want to be if you want this sort of nicer looking car. Seems there's loads and loads and loads of the 22s in white. Like, absolutely loads of them. So I'm guessing Renault were doing some really good deals on them, just in the basic white without the colour options. But I think that sort of £4,500 to £5,000 probably where I'd want to be. And let's be honest, that's a decent amount of car for the money. If the range of the 22 works for you, I don't think you can go far wrong. And it's one of the few cars at this sort of end of the market, right? There are not many EVs out there you can buy for about £5,000 that are actually decent, usable cars. So the Zoe's definitely in the running there. If you want the higher range of the ZE40, it looks like you'll need to spend about £8,000. There's actually 4 of them here, all around sort of 7,989, 7,995. It seems that is the price for the ZE40 with reasonably low mileage in good condition. It seems it's much easier to find the ZE40 in an actual colour. We've got metallic red, metallic grey, and there was a few more as well, but these were the ones that I picked out. It seems £8,000 if you need the extra range over the 22, and obviously you've got significantly more range. I think these are all battery lease cars. None of them made a song and dance in the advert about being battery owned, so I think the ZE40, I'm guessing just people haven't got round to buying out the batteries yet, and so there's much more chance, it seems, that they are battery leased. I'm sure if you search around, you will find one that's battery owned, and if that's what you're looking for, you will be able to find one, although obviously remember you can buy out the batteries on these. I think though for a 40 you'll still be looking at a good couple of £1,000 to buy the battery, so you'd need to weigh that in certainly as to whether the purchase price plus the battery price was going to be worth it for you. But if you were happy just to continue with the lease, then they seem like great good value for money as well. Where the real value for money with the Zoe seems to lie though is in that ZE50 model. Now, as I said before, CCS rapid charging is an optional extra on most of the ZE50, so you need to make sure that it's included if you want it. If you don't want it, you can actually get yourself a really good buy. I saw Jonathan Porterfield, he's a guy who buys cars at auction for people. So you tell him what you want and he goes off to BCA and he finds it for you, adds his fee on top, and you end up still paying less than you would to a dealer. And he posted on Twitter the other day that he bought someone a 71 reg Zoe ZE50 without rapid charging for £9,800 with less than 5,000 miles on the clock. And I mean, that's an absolute bargain, isn't it? It's barely used at all. And if you can live without the rapid charging, I would say that's a really good deal. That was until I went on AutoTrader and I found this. £9,295 for a Zoe ZE50 on a 70 reg with rapid charging. One owner from new. Okay, a little bit higher mileage, 52,000 miles. And that's actually for a 3-year-old car, or 2.5-year-old car, you know, it's been busy, but it's not like way beyond the realms of possibility. This isn't crazy miles, but it's just a little bit higher than some of the others. And I think this is a really, really good deal. Now, it's a private seller. It would be up to you to do a bit of due diligence and make sure that that was suitable for you, but it seems like a bargain. Certainly when you compare it to this one at a little dealership. For £11,295 for a slightly older car on a 20 reg, so it's 6 months older, 42,000 on the clock. I mean, there isn't much between them, and actually the private one at £2,000 less seems like an absolute bargain. Now, of course, if you watched this week's news video, you will have seen that there are a number of these at Renault dealerships for £12,500 in the iconic rapid charge flavour. 71 reg, sub 15,000 miles, 12.5 grand, and there's 5 or 6 of them dotted around Renault dealerships all around the country. This is the one that I featured in the news video, and I think those represent really good value for money too. If you want the benefit of buying approved used from a Renault dealer, you want something sort of as new and as low mileage as you can find, but still at a really good price, these ones, 12.5, probably a pretty good buy. Although if it was me, I'd be picking up the phone to that private seller and taking their arm off at £9,300. I think that's astonishing value for money. And actually, it makes the £8,000 ZE40s with the leased batteries look like terrible value when you can buy a battery-owned ZE50 for not very much more. So that then was the roundup of the Renault Zoe on the used market. What do you think? Does that low NCAP score put you off? Or do these new prices make it much more appealing to you? I mean, I think it represents really good value for money. As long as the size, the form factor and stuff works for you, I think it looks really good indeed. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Tell me as well, what other cars would you like to see me do these sort of used market reviews on? There's loads of stuff out there at the moment that I think is representing really, really good value in the EV market. And I'm going to continue just picking one at random and doing this, but if there's any that are really burning, that you really want to see, well, I wonder how they're getting on, let me know and I'll see what I can do. If you want to find out more about the used market for the Hyundai Ioniq, watch this next video.